I'm the Littleton Town Administrator, and this is a second public forum that the Town of Littleton is hosting on the update of our open space and recreation plan. And there's been a lot of work that's been done over a matter of months and years, really, by our Open Space and Recreation Plan Implementation Committee, chaired by Andrew Samarco, and I'm going to introduce Andrew and invite him up here in a moment. We will be having a presentation and a facilitated discussion led by planners from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, MAPC. That's our regional planning agency for the metropolitan Boston area and the 101 cities and towns, including the town of Littleton. And we've worked with MAPC before on updating our housing production plan back several years ago, and I think in this room and other rooms we developed overlay districts for the Littleton Common and developed zoning amendments to preserve and enhance agriculture, and we've done a lot of work with MAPC over the years, so we're happy to have them back. I want to call upon Andrew Samarco as our chair of the Open Space and Recreation Implementation Committee, and he will give us a quick update on how this updated Open Space and Recreation Plan process is going. Our ultimate goal is to submit this plan to the state for approval, just as we submitted our housing production plan to state government for approval under a particular program. The open space and recreation plan that a community adopts is also subject to approval by a state agency, which then makes the community eligible for grant funding, among other things. And it's been important over the years for Littleton to be able to pursue grant funding for open space acquisitions, for recreation projects and other things. And so we're looking forward to having the plan be updated and certified so that we can go after even more grant money. So welcome all of you, and I'll call upon Andrew. Thanks very much.
You want me to go up?
Sure, come on up.
Okay. So good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out. So as Keith had mentioned before, the committee's been active in preparing the draft 2016 plan for the town. Much of the information that we have in this updated plan has come from previous plans, 03, 09. We've had a forum prior to tonight back in, what was it, June of 2000?
Before that, I think.
It was a while back. Yeah. And we've also had a town-wide survey that we gathered a lot of the data from for this particular plan. But for tonight, we're going to be mainly seeking public input on the updates that we have to be included in the plan. Along with the committee's work, we've had the assistance of MAPC, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which has done these wonderful maps for us here that you guys have in front of you. And they've also been helping us out a great deal with data collection and other valuable statistics for the plan. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be mentioning anything else, but that's basically a quick rundown of how we've prepared this draft plan so far. So we're hoping to get some good input tonight, and from here I'll introduce Cynthia Wall from MAPC.
Thank you.
Oh, everyone will clap.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew and Keith. It's always a pleasure to be back working in Littleton. Tonight, as Andrew said, we would like to get your opinion on some of the draft recommendations we have for the Open Space and Recreation Plan. We'll give a brief project background, and then we will really like to discuss the goals and action items, and then we'll wrap up with next steps. The Metropolitan Area Planning Council, for whom I work, provides planning, transportation, environmental, and collective purchasing services to 101 cities and towns in the Boston region. We work with all these communities to implement Metro Future, our regional plan. A little background on MAPC. So, turning back, I guess, to the agenda. What do we mean by open space, and what do we mean by recreation? Very broadly, open space is land that is not developed. It could be conservation land, which is defined as wise use of land. Preservation, on the other hand, means maintaining land in its natural state for the quiet enjoyment of users. There are often unique historical, cultural, wildlife habitats, or water resources associated with open space. Open space can also refer to lands used for recreation, agriculture, or forestry. But it is sort of exactly what you think it is. It's open, it's not built on. Recreation, as the state terms it, is divided into two categories, active and passive. Active recreation typically involves things that are done competitively or in man-made facilities, such as competitively swimming, tennis, baseball, basketball, or golf, something like that. That's recreation. And of course, the playing fields and that kind of thing, active recreation. Passive recreation is defined as activity that can be performed outdoors with a minimum of disturbance to natural areas. So that would include hiking, picnicking, canoeing, ice skating, cross-country skiing. So that's kind of the breakdown in the two categories. As Andrew mentioned, the Open Space Committee has drafted the plan. You have had other plans over about 25 years. You've had plans, and the state requires that they be updated. So this is the latest update. Often we talk about it as an open space plan, but it's really an open space and recreation plan. So lest anyone think that recreation is not as important as conservation, that's not true. I think if people started calling it the recreation plan, or recreation and open space plan, we'd refer to it in the short term as the recreation plan. So just, they're equal partners in these plans. As Keith mentioned, one of the main reasons to do a plan is to make sure you're eligible for various funding programs that include state and federal funds. It's also a really good idea because you're doing planning. You're deciding what your priorities are when it comes time to perhaps acquire land that is available either through conservation or maybe it's been used as agricultural land. If you don't have a plan, you don't know strategically what you really want to do. Maybe there's an opportunity to connect two existing open spaces, but if you haven't thought about it and said, gee, that would make a great parcel to acquire to connect, or maybe if the developer comes in and does an open space zoning, we can ask for that particular portion of the lot. So that's another reason to do a plan, because it does form a very good foundation as you look at your open space and recreation needs. The plan that we developed and that we've been working on, we are actually given, not the template, but we are given the categories and the sections that must be covered, because these are done statewide and they're evaluated by the state to be sure that they include everything that needs to be in a plan. It has 11 sections and 8 required maps. Now for Littleton, we actually did, at the town manager's request, another map showing just agricultural lands. So, and I think it's a really great map, but of course, being statewide, there are many communities that don't have agricultural land, so they wouldn't require it. But this will be included in Littleton's submission. Along with the 11 sections that you see up here, talking about the community and the environmental inventory, the vision, which we will get back to shortly, It follows along till you develop goals and objectives, and then the action plan, which is really the heart of the plan. It's what are you going to do? Also, MAPC is helping with the Americans with Disabilities Act, also called shorthand ADA, the inventory of all of the town-owned conservation and recreation land. And I would like to thank Amy Green, the Littleton Conservation Agent, and Alicia Day, the Littleton Director of Parks, Recreation, and Community Education. Each one of them accompanied me for the day when I went and did the inventory. And of course, I'm very grateful that they did, particularly Ms. Green. I'd probably still be wandering a few of those conservation areas. So the town has been very supportive and very helpful, along with the volunteer committee, in putting the plan together. So what do we mean by putting it together? Well, in shorthand, those sections that were on the previous slide, they answer the question, what do we have? What do we have in Littleton? What do we have for conservation land? What do we have for recreation facilities? And then they go on to ask, well, what do you need or what do you want? And Andrew mentioned the survey, and we did have the recreation forum in June, and people were great. I had lots of suggestions about recreation, what was missing, what needed to occur, what needed to be done. And then through the plan, you analyze what is missing or what is desired, what is the community looking to do. And then you develop goals and objectives, and then that leads to the action items that we're here to discuss tonight. Does anyone have any questions? You see how it really does follow. You do one portion of one section and then the next section, and then you develop the action plans at the end. So the one requirement is that we develop a vision. That's one of the sections. So this is the vision that the committee came up with. And do you want to take a minute to read it? Would anybody like me to read it, or you prefer to read it yourself?
Why don't you read it?
All right, I'll read it. And please, this is kind of the area where we'd like comment. Littleton's ideal open space system would provide links between existing open space lands, whether they are owned by the town, the Littleton Conservation Trust, or other entities. The connections would extend to neighboring communities, open spaces, and trails. Agriculture would be a prominent land use, helping to preserve our rural character. All ages and interests would be accommodated by a variety of recreation facilities, including sports fields, parks, and conservation land. What do you think?
Seems reasonable, absolutely.
Should we vote? Show of hands? Great. Okay. Yeah, I thought it was great. And again, these are volunteers in your community who developed this, so. So, what happens next? We've got the vision. In short, action items, really, they're a checklist. And on the table, I hope everybody got their, it says 2 of 14, the cover page is just a cover page, but your booklet of goals and action items. And we're going to spend really the rest of the evening examining or talking about what you think. Are the priorities right? Have we forgotten anything?
Quick question.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure I read this right. So goal number 1 is protect and enhance our water quality, and then are the actions underneath that to support goal number 1?
Exactly.
And then the number 1 priority, the number 1 task to support goal number 1 will be protect all surface and subsurface waters.
Exactly.
Okay.
But that's draft. The state requires or really requests that you prioritize your goals and your action steps, and that, that's kind of a big job. But they'll send it back, and they'll say, well, would you please prioritize this? What do you want to do first? What are your key priorities? So every goal, you see goal 1, and then on the next page, goal 2, that goes on for 2 pages, goal 3. That's actually, those are the priority that the committee set.
Yeah, and I might add that nothing is set in stone. I mean, based on the input tonight, we can change things, delete things, add things, whatever you want to do.
And given that, again, it's the first time I'm seeing this, and, yeah, it's fine, yeah, you can think on your feet and a lot of impact, but if you want some additional input, what's the mechanism for that? And then maybe things not added that you would like to add, but
You can always email the committee or
Right.
through the town administrator's office and the board of selectmen's office.
in the time frame, it'd be good to have one contact, actually, and have a period of time, because, I mean, obviously, you're trying to pull it together, and you have some sort of schedule.
Well, my email's there, but we could do, Keith, what do you think? What would be easiest for you?
I'm happy to have it come to me. My email address is on. We can also set up a
And copy.
email address for openspace@middletonma.org. So that will be done by tomorrow.
Well, why don't we,
Just
You
one
know-
more quick question.
so is that what, is that our consensus? Let's, 1 word, 2 words, how would that be? We'll put it right down. Open space,
Open space, one word. At littletonma.org.
Who's that go to?
That will go to the,
There's no Dr. Littleton in MA.
That will go
I'm
to,
asking, I didn't hear the.
that'll be a forwarding address that will go to myself and Andrew and Cynthia for starters.
Oh, okay. So,
Yeah.
But remember, that also includes recreation. That's what I meant, we're kind of losing shorthand, but let's not forget that does, if you have any comments about recreation.
Just one other question. Is this in any particular order? Like, was this a prioritized list, or did it just happen to be the order in which you collected them?
Except for the, well, Andrew, what do you think?
The committee tried its very best to go to order them based on survey results and public input that we've received so far. But this ordering could change tonight based on what we receive.
Thank you.
Sir?
Yeah, I've got a question about a sort of a pet project of mine, and I defer to everyone who's done all the work, and I'm just showing up late to the game. But one thing I've always sort of thought would be great in town would be a bike path around Long Lake. And so I was looking at the bicycle section, but that seemed to be about bike paths on roads. And so I'm not sure whether a bike path around Long Lake would count under the bicycle section, or sort of seems like recreation to me. So I don't know, but
We can certainly add that in.
Yeah, it's the bike paths too, such as we talked about too. Differentiation on necessarily roads.
Around part of the lake already. It connects to the Frog Trail system.
right. That raises actually a number of interesting issues. There are, on either side of the beach, or sort of on the beach, there's what's supposed to be public access, where private citizens have put fences and essentially claimed the land that is actually public land. So you can't actually bike as far around as you could, and I know there are people who have wanted us to enforce that for years, but, so it's not, so, there you go.
Well, that came up a number of years ago on Roxbury Drive, where a property owner basically was bullying people off until finally the police department posted it as public access. The thing that's tricky now is you don't know exactly where the boundary line is.
Would it be all right if I just took some questions, because people have hands, and then when we get to the different topics, we'll really have time to have a conversation
Yeah, I
about
just
it?
didn't know what topic to go under, but thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I had a question about having these action items prioritized, putting the acquisition, construction, more playing field below purchasing open space and farmland. My concern is that there would eventually be limited resources. And I can see the purchase of open space and farmland be very expensive, a very costly thing to do for the town. So my concern is with the playing field and recreational space becoming third, I'm wondering if we'll ever even get to those.
Well, I'm so glad that you brought that up. You're kind of anticipating the whole discussion. And I really wanted to make this the brief version, as they say. That's why you have your dots tonight, to assist with prioritizing the action items. Did you get they're little green dots numbered 1 to 9? And we can change that. If you think that goal should be higher, that item should be...
Why do we have to separate them? Why can't we just have that in one goal?
Well, we could.
Okay. I'm just
Good.
putting it out there.
If that's what people want to do, we absolutely can. I didn't understand the question, Tom.
Yeah, instead of fighting over crumbs and saying one pathogens first and another, second, we really need a second mechanism, maybe some action items, is having innovative funding for both, maybe sports, Wilton Sports Foundation, as they have in some communities. In other cases, innovative funding that might go for open space. Yeah, it isn't necessarily fighting over some small limited amount. I mean, I think leadership of both would find new funding sources. I think that's been sort of the heart of some of the problems for a long time.
Isn't that goal number 8?
Should we?
Goal number 8
These goals were established, anybody that knows me, I'm a recreation guy, not an open space guy. These goals were put in this order by the survey of the people. You know, we didn't make these up ourselves, but the survey we did, it's probably close to 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. That's how we come up with these goals and action plans. It wasn't just the pull them out of the hat type of thing.
Was that the survey that was handed out at town meeting?
That was one place, but it went out in the light water bills also.
It was online, it was a number of
Yeah.
places. And we addressed it actually at our last June meeting,
Yeah.
that same issue.
Yeah, when I say the committee, I mean, they wrote the language, but the items came up. Some of the, they did a little editing.
Actually,
But,
we did leave a portion of the survey open to interpretation from the public, and some of the stuff did come just out of the blue from the public's participation.
Yes.
One thing I'd like to point out on farmland purchases and
Could we move on and just kind of give an overview and then because I don't like turning my back on you, and I have someone, my boss actually, who can take over, and I can do the scribing. So is that all right, so that we can just get through the program? Mr. Knox?
I just have one question. Is there a map that identifies the active recreation lands, like the playing fields? Because I'm looking at these maps and trying to identify which one are actually playing fields and which one is protected as open space.
No, there isn't a separate map just for the playing fields. We did have it at the recreation meeting, and I do have, actually, I did bring a copy of it. Would that be helpful? Should we do that? Why don't we go through it, then we'll get the map out. I did bring the map that we have, if you recall, at the recreation meeting.
Yeah, there's some concerns. It'd be nice to get the umbrella overview
Yeah.
as you plan.
Okay.
First, then we can get into details.
So this map, and there are copies, small copies, that you have with you. And we have, where is it? It's right here. Again, it's a required map. I don't know whether it really lends itself, some of these activities, to being mapped, but we did the best we could to identify, again, this is from the survey and with the committee, the number one action item for each goal. So the numbers are not the priorities overall, they're the priorities, the number links to the goal. And on the back of your agenda, we try to simplify it. So on the left is the action, the number one action item under goal number 1. protect and enhance water quality in Littleton. And that seemed to be, from the surveys and from comments, that's the #1 priority of the town in terms of open space and recreation type activities and similar. I mean, that's, you know, it's actually sort of a preservation element. And that's very interesting because it, not only does it involve Littleton's wells, but Concord's water supply at Lake Nagog. So it's very interesting that you've taken such a holistic approach of all the things that you could select. That's the one. So that's pretty awesome, I think. Thinking regionally. And number 2 is purchase, the action item number 2. And again, it's a little hard to see here. So it might be easier if you look on your own little copy of it. Now, we didn't map this. The number 2 priority for the goal of, the goal is to preserve Littleton's important land resources through land acquisition, conservation restrictions, agricultural preservation restrictions, improved management, and education. And that top action item is to purchase open space and farmland. Now, we didn't map this because it's suggested that you don't map it, actually. You don't want to give people the signal, well, that land, but not that land necessarily in a 7-year action plan in order to sort of protect your price. And again, you work in committee, you will have some strategies, you may map out an open space or a network, but to have it in a map that's going to be around for 7 years is not something that is always recommended.
Yeah, I think that's been the thoughts in the past, but what I see now in open space plans and reports are the fact that you look at open space and you look at Chapter 61 land and it gets prioritized. And this is an example from Acton's open space plan, where it's looked at and people from recreation will evaluate it, people from open space will evaluate it, then environmental significance is evaluated, then there's a final score. So it gives a little more order to decide what to purchase. In some cases, landowners come forward and offer the land. And I agree with you, the thoughts of the past were, okay, you don't make open where you're trying to purchase because someone's going to jack up the price. But when you have to prioritize and you have to come together and negotiate, you need something. And, you know, this is a public document. I see this in Westfield, Groton, Acton. So I think there's maybe a change in thoughts about it because it's important to get back and raise the funds and figure out what's most appropriate for which parcel.
And that's a great idea, because that could be a follow-up action item to convene a group of people. Convene the people from Littleton Conservation Trust and from the Conservation Commission and from the farmers and everybody, and say, how would we prioritize? So now let's do this. And you would do this, you know, at probably public working sessions, but it would be a kind of a smaller venue, and then you might have a report or might have it ready when you needed it. I think could be a great next step.
Negotiations are often done behind the scene.
Exactly.
Which is allowed through the open meeting capability in private groups. Yeah.
But if you used a matrix like that to check off, I think you would find your most important and valuable lands that you wanted would probably come right to the top. So that could be a next step. I think that's a great
So
one.
there are examples here.
Yeah.
And Acton's done a good job.
While we're on this topic of goal number 2 of preserving Littleton's agricultural lands, we have action items with who listed next to them, but I don't see the Agricultural Commission listed in those groups.
Oh, I thought it was. I thought we had.
So while Littleton's Agricultural Commission is not super active, they certainly react when there's an issue. Amongst our landowners are 61A. And the Agricultural Commission should be probably front and center on this. It's one of the reasons why we have it, and I don't see it listed there.
Okay, I think, yes, I know, I think I
And we
went to
also
one of
need to
your
keep in
meetings.
mind that Farm Bureau, our delegate body, had, the farmers across the state are pushing to have agricultural commissions have more power within town, so we need to keep that in mind as we are planning all of this looking forward, considering it's going to be a 7-year plan.
So are you saying the agricultural commission should be under the?
I mean, if this goal number 2 is strictly about agriculture, and how to work with property owners and all of that, I think the agricultural commission should be front and center on that.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to the, and you'll have some time to review this before we vote. Goal number 3, provide improved recreational opportunities for Littleton residents of all ages and abilities. And the number 1 priority is suggested to acquire and/or construct more playing fields. And on the map, a few of the places mentioned were right here behind the police station. There's a Trotter Field, what is the correct name? We were out there.
The Beaver Brook sorry, yeah, it's getting their mind right now. It's across the street from the middle school.
Yes, across from the middle school. It's not a very, we went out, of course, and looked at it, but, you know, maybe one of your next steps should be a feasibility study of your recreation needs and where you might meet them. There's also a St. Anne's Church land that may become available. But that should be, the consensus for the draft was that would be the number 1 priority under that goal number 3. Goal 4, balanced development with preservation of open space to help retain Littleton's rural character. And the number 1 priority is actually on the next page. And as a planner who does a lot with zoning, I loved this. And again, this is draft, so it could change, but right now, it's suggested that it be encourage priority preservation of scenic open space and agricultural lands through the use of the planning board's open space cluster bylaw. You all familiar with that?
This is open space development bylaw that doesn't use the word cluster, but it's called open space.
Yeah. So, yes?
One of the items here says explore the creation and implementation of a town scenic roads bylaw. We already have one.
Oh, that's right.
Okay.
We'll just strike that.
Well, it's very weak. I mean, it lists the roads, that's about it.
Well,
It lists the roads, it does restrict tree cutting, disturbance of stone walls.
so that, you know, that's great, because that's something that's been accomplished probably since the last plan. So that's, you know, this is draft. This is exactly the kind of comment that we need, so we can get it right. Thank you.
If you do want to strengthen something, strengthen the bylaws to protect historic buildings.
Well, we're getting to that. So that is goal 4. Goal 5, enhance bicycle and pedestrian access and safety throughout the town. And then the first suggested priority or action item is to establish more bicycle and pedestrian routes on new and existing town, private, and state-owned land. I think that could include roads. To me, it does, although there is another quite similar action item further down. So, you know, we could wordsmith, or we could strike that if you wanted to make an adjustment.
Can I ask you a question, Brian, on that one? Is there any possibility of cooperation with Acton to get us some safe bicycle access to the Bruce Friedman Trail extension that they're finally working on, down by 27?
Yeah, it's certainly needed. It's been mentioned.
That would be great. I mean, that's going to be a wonderful trail system that's almost within reach. It's just, I'm not sure I'd go on that little stretch of road before it on my bike. Currently.
Brian, we're lucky to have an extension that actually goes all the way to I forgot where the restaurant, anyway, there's an extension that we can get to through some of our conservation land and
basically have a bicycle route that probably is not going to be improved to the level of Bruce Freeman Trail, but we could get over to it at 27.
Oh, outstanding, excellent.
If
Thank
you look at a map. And
Outstanding.
we've been trying to get access through a housing development that owns some of the land there. We haven't been lucky so far, but we're working on it.
Working on it, man.
Something we're working on, and also the connection through some of the land owned by Concord by Nagod Pond, since they're upgrading the filtration plant. Issue's been raised, they now have to do environmental impact report, which they try to get a waiver on, and Acton Littleton's trying to make trails through there.
That's great. You'll see, I can understand, sir, it is a little confusing, because when we get down to Goal 7, it's linking the open space and trails throughout the town and on a regional level. So that's where we talk about the town borders. So I can see where, does it go under that one? Does it go under the roads? I think, we'll see what the committee wants to, what you want to do with it.
But the Bruce Freeman Trail is a huge, major trail.
Yeah.
We do need
If you
some access.
please do connect Littleton somehow to the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, then I can bike to work.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or my property butts,
They circumvent Knights Pond in
Yeah.
Concord.
Okay.
What I was going to request is, I believe this was written, but I don't see it enforced, is when any road is a new road built or a road at this point, the road I'm living off of, New Estate Road, is resurfaced or redone, that there should be a minimum amount of edge on the road that bicycles should be safely, able to use. For instance, whatever that is deemed, is it a foot enough, or is 2 feet really the minimum? It doesn't have to be a bike lane, but at least safe access to be riding on that road. And certainly, especially the side roads, we have lots of cyclists. I mean, I ride all over through many towns, and we try to take as many back roads as possible, but to be quite honest, the main roads have more of a shoulder than the back roads do at this point. Even some of the new ones, you go down Nagog Road, and there are portions of it that have a very nice shoulder, and then there are some that are practically non-existent, which doesn't make sense to me, because there's actually land and space there. They weren't attentive when they laid that asphalt to make sure that there was at least a reasonable shoulder on the side there. And if you put a foot and there's a sidewalk, you guarantee there's going to be debris that's going to fall into that, be pushed to the side and block that shoulder, so a cyclist has to move into the road. And automobile drivers are not very patient when a cyclist has to pull out into the roadway, even though it is legal, to get out of the way or go around any debris or lack of having a reasonable shoulder.
We need a plan, a map. I know in 119, people, from even Ashburnham have planned to come through Groton and then to hit Littleton. It's rather difficult. I think essentially we need a plan. And also you wonder when all the bridges are recreated, are they really planning lanes for a bicycle? I know Jim Klein might have some input there, but I've never heard ARPA for input on that.
Well, I'm wondering if, Littleton has a complete street, that you adopted a complete streets policy, actually one of the first communities.
Right.
Yeah, in fact, on that, Cynthia, that the town of Littleton was just awarded a Complete Streets planning grant of $43,000 from Mass DOT, from the state, and those funds will be used to develop what the state calls a prioritization plan, and we will be doing that between now and August 1st, using some engineering assistance. And the purpose will be to come up with our plan of what complete streets type improvements would we want to see throughout town, whether it's sidewalks, whether it's areas that could be used for bike paths, or just the long list of things that you can do in the name of complete streets, with our goal being then by the end of the summer, apply for up to $400,000 in the next level of Mass DOT grants under Complete Streets program. So I think it's an opportune time to specifically include the development of the Complete Streets prioritization plan in this plan. And because we'll be doing we'll be moving forward with those initiatives in the coming months.
So making sure we mention it. It
Yeah.
is here as one of the
Yeah,
goals.
it's going to be done, let's include it in the plan.
Can you include the suggestion of this woman here that, at the minimum, when roads are repaved, that you provide a shoulder for bikes? I mean, that seems to
Well,
be
the
something you
Complete
might be
Streets
able
policy right now provides that at a minimum, when we go through the planning process for a road improvement, that we look at those as opportunities to address complete streets issues, and where we can and where it makes sense financially and in terms of the geography, we do it. I mean, there were some roads that we've done, they were too narrow, they were too near wetlands or the pond that we couldn't configure. As much as we would have loved to have put a pedestrian path, we couldn't fit it on the right-of-way. In others, like New Estate Road, we could put a sidewalk in or something, so we did it. But that is part of the Complete Streets policy.
Right.
and it
I
should be-
still don't see how
should be
that's
reflected here.
directly related to, a minimum of a 2-foot shoulder. I mean, I'm not saying you need a full walkway path, because most bikes, especially if you're a commuter, you don't ride on sidewalks, and you don't ride on a walkway, you ride on the road. That's what you're supposed to do. And so just having a reasonable shoulder
Yeah.
is not, to me, it's just you either adopt that policy that you'll do that, or you don't.
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting, that,
Yeah.
there'd be discussion and you could adopt that maybe as part of the,
The opportunity we'll have to do that, I think, is in the prioritization plan, where
And
that
the
bubbles up to
planning.
the top, to have that
yeah.
throughout, or at least on whatever roads are designated, that's the opportunity. to do it.
So the town's working on it, actually, but when they put out the call for volunteers to come to the meetings, we will make note of this.
Yeah, and we've made note of it tonight. Appreciate it. Jim Clyde from Highway.
We do look at that when we design the roads going forward, and it's a balancing act. We had somebody over there suggest the scenic roads, and so if you want bike lanes, you're gonna cut all the trees down. So it's threading the needle with an existing road. There's a lot that goes into it, and we don't take it lightly. I mean, we do what we possibly can to make it as
Yeah.
wide as we can.
Right, no, and a bike lane isn't what I'm asking for. That's a
Yeah.
significant amount more piece of, space you need. I mean, a 2-foot shoulder is really,
When the pavement that we put down is usually the maximum that we can fit in that area without removing significant amount of trees.
I'm just, like I said, I was just observing that Nagog Hill it's a new road, it's newly paved, and it definitely has areas that, Neshoba Road, right? Neshoba Road, and it has, good shoulder in a lot of it, but there are areas where, for whatever reason, it's, very, in a small section.
Come to the meetings.
That's all.
119 has the same problem. I know it's not hard
Yeah,
to do, but 119 has areas that have zero shoulder.
right. And it was just repaved.
Yes.
Right.
What happens when the state comes in and does bridges across 495? I mean, those are often barriers getting from one part of the town to the next.
Well, I'll just pick on the Great Road project. There was 4 lanes of traffic going across, and the state has made an effort to make bike lanes, so if you notice, went down to 3 lanes, so they could try and squeeze a bike lane into that. And they actually wanted the developer to pay to put a new bridge, which he couldn't fund for like $6 million. But, so you can get across the bridge, but you can't get there.
Yeah, but at least it's planning ahead. What about Taylor Street, where that massive development is going to bridge there? Is there any provision for a crossing over for pedestrians or bicycles?
They're putting a sidewalk on it.
Maybe we could go back. I'd just like to go through, we skipped number 6. The goal there is to promote the use of Littleton's open space by residents through developing better access to protected properties and encouraging community participation in open space maintenance. And the action item that is suggested is to expand parking at open space sites, including handicap parking. And I will say from my doing the survey that, yes, very rarely is there any signage. Some of the open spaces didn't have actually much parking. I could see on a busy summer day that they would be filled. So that became the suggested action item for that goal.
And to continue, it's worthwhile having access to parking year-round. And I know there are issues about plowing, but I see in Acton, parking lots are plowed so people can snowshoe, walk, ski, or whatever. And we've tried realizing there's a cost attached to it and realizing this isn't a top priority, but it makes sense having done somewhat so you can use the lands. We've actually tried to get volunteer people to plow, but the insurance restraints of the town have forbidden that, so even volunteers can't plow out areas, so we need to solve that somehow.
Yeah,
That's
you're
a
bringing,
better-
Mr. McCaver, you're bringing up a lot of follow-up activities, which is good. So circling back, if you will, to number 7, was to link the open space and trails throughout towns. I guess we talked about that on the regional level. So here was the item to work with local conservation commissions and land trusts from contiguous towns to identify parcels of open space which might be connected across town borders. So that'll be such an interesting mapping project. We've done some of that at MAPC with some other communities, and it's just really fun to start looking at that level, at the different open spaces and how they could be connected.
And just building upon that, I've seen your workshop in Southborough and so on. Could you do one here to work with adjacent towns? I
Sure.
think that was very useful.
Yep, that's what I was thinking of.
On the map that you're showing here, the blue arrows show reference to number 7. That you
Yes.
just mentioned.
Yes.
There's 3 blue arrows. Are they, is that a very local reference, or is it the whole town? And
It's
why are there only
illustrative.
3 arrows, I guess?
It's kind of illustrative. It tried to link to open space. The light green is open space in another town. The dark green is open space in your town. So just kind of following up on what it said, work with other towns
Yep.
and see if we could make linkages. So it's just illustrative, but you might want to start in these areas. There might be better areas or other areas. I don't know where though. I think those were the best ones that we discovered when we worked with that. Oh, and the bike trail, the number 7 is the green line. And again, just kind of illustrative to show what we mean by the action items. And as you follow up and join the committee for open space and recreation implementation, and go to the meetings or form little subcommittees to work on certain things, you take this as a starting point, and then you'll get more detailed maps and work from there.
Yeah, just to follow up on that comment, through Community Preservation Committee, which Littleton has and I'm on, all our neighboring towns have community preservation acts enacted, I think, as well, too. So it's possible, and there's no really restriction, I believe, on partnering with other towns. So if you had a project that crossed borders for whatever was allowable, it's a possible thing that we could link with other communities. So
Wow.
I like the arrows. I just think they might go in all directions on a certain level.
Well, we could, if you come up to the map when we break out and do the dots and grab the blue pen, just help yourself. Seriously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes?
Before we go up and put our dots up there, I just want to, there's some assumptions that I guess we have to make.
Could I go through this?
Sure.
And then open it up. I just want everybody to see the universe that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Okay, sure.
Thank you. So goal 8 kind of again gets to one of the points Mr. Side made about find funding resources outside of taxes. We're talking about town taxes for protecting open space or building recreation facilities. And I think that actually the goal is actually the best action item. So that's the same, it's the exact same one, and we didn't map it. And then the last goal 9, addresses something that the gentleman in the back, is Mr. Groovy? Sorry? No, something about identify and preserve significant Native American, historical, and culturally significant sites, and then number 1, create a town historic or neighborhood conservation district. Now, I understand this was addressed a couple years ago, maybe 20 years ago, and wasn't too well received. But this is, again, coming to the top because you really want to try to preserve your significant streetscapes. You've got some beautiful areas, and one of the ones that we actually thought about was the Foster Street. That's mine. Okay, so there are the action items. Yeah, there we are. But beyond, you can't see it too well, but beyond this bandstand in Fay Park is, you know, some beautiful historic houses on Foster Street. So, what is next? I guess we could continue the discussion, because what we would like is for you to take your dots, but I know that we want to have some more comments, and make changes. I mean, again, and Mark will explain this when we get there, so that, for example, number 6 isn't like number 6 for the whole list. It's number 6 for goal number 6. So it requires you, if you will, to look at the big map and maybe look at everything else under goal number 6 and say, yes, I agree, that really is the top item. Or I think it should be something else. And you can tell us what you think it should be. We have comment cards as well. Or you can send an email.
And just a clarification, I know one of the issues that hasn't surfaced yet, it's boiling in my community, about the open space cluster bylaw. This is an optional choice versus mandated. So currently use what we have in place where there's a choice and no one tries to devalue someone's land one way or another. I mean, Mark did a very good job when he worked this through, but I think there's some confusion about how it gets applied.
Well, do they have to do, I'm sorry, I'm not totally familiar with it, but in many communities, they have to do a conventional subdivision to find out the yield plan. How many lots could you get? If you just did what you normally would do and you lay out your land and you cut most of your trees, how many lots would you get? Well, let's say you'd get 10 lots. And you say, okay, well, that's your 10 lots, but now you can reduce your lot size, you can reduce your side yards, you can cluster them together, even though that term isn't used, but you could put maybe you could put 5 here and 5 here, and then you can leave the rest as open space. And
right, and that is what we do, so maybe it's utilize / encourage.
Yeah.
And I think this is the interpretation, at least in this process. I know there's other stuff happening elsewhere, which
so what do you?
I'm not going to touch.
Okay, so come up and, make the changes. I want to, there's some new hands, and then we'll talk with you about what we need to do. Mr. Knox?
You put a lot of time, and I appreciate all the goals, and I think they're phenomenal. The only thing I have a reservation about is that if you only have 25 people here, and we're going to have to put 1, 2, 3, 4, we're 25 people, we're not representing 9,000 townspeople. So 2 years from now, are we going to say that this was the number one thing in town? It's a small representation. I know it's why I'm trying to get things done, but I just think asking 25 people to tell the town this is the most important thing might not be representative.
Well, that's a good point, but that's why, we have the whole list. The whole list will be included, and as you get the implementation committee together and your other committees, somebody comes together to work on complete streets, someone comes together to work on the CPA, they pull out the plan, it's the way it's supposed to work, pull out the plan and say, you know what, that was the number one, but what's our consensus now? This is just a guideline. You're not legally bound to follow it, but it's a guideline. Everything else being equal, if you had a chance to protect and enhance the water quality, what would you do? Okay, that's what we do. And I appreciate what you're saying. I know it's going to be broadcast, this is going to be broadcast, is that right, on cable? So people will have an opportunity.
So we get the results, and do we have another opportunity to comment on them?
I think we'd probably put it on the website at this point, because we do want to, submit the plan.
So maybe in stages, submitting is important, I understand. But maybe the results and then comment on the collective view from this group.
Sir?
Follow up on the last point, would it make sense to go out again, since this is 2 years old, maybe go out with another survey? some form, to the general public. That's one thought. Another thought, I was looking at goal number 8. Most of the goals I see are an end. I see goal number 8, finding funding sources, more of a means to an end.
Okay, so we could have a consensus to eliminate that one as a goal?
I'm not sure I would eliminate it. I'm just saying.
The goal.
I mean, a lot of what you have here is gonna, you know, you're gonna have to have some funds for it. It seems to me that this, again, it seems comparing apples and oranges.
Okay.
But it seems to me without number 8, you're not gonna be able to do a lot of the initiatives that you want.
But I think it's important, yeah, as you said, it leads to the others, and it has to get addressed somehow, and it really hasn't been.
So what would you suggest, that we put it maybe in the introduction to the whole section and just say, this is something we need to be mindful of as we work through all the rest of the goals?
Well, if you keep it as a goal, it almost seems like it needs to be a higher priority, but, you know, if you don't keep it as a goal, you know, you gotta call it out too.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure how to just bring it up.
Okay, I've been raising my hand off.
Okay.
So I know a lot of this has already been addressed in all my questions, so.
Yeah, no, it hasn't. I just tried to get it.
Fundamental thing.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
One of the fundamental thing in ranking priorities, the assumption is that we have unlimited resources, I would assume, when we go up there, say, well, this is important, this is important. And the real fact is that we don't, and the selectmen won't. So by sending a message that these are the most important things, and then for them to look at the same list with a confined funding source, they may not be making the correct decisions. For example, my wife and I are renovating our home, and it's going to cost 30 grand to do our kitchen. And we're getting our tax return this year, and we're looking at that. It's really expensive, but it only costs $2,000 to do something else that we want to do. And we could probably make it realistic. We can accomplish that goal quickly. And even though the kitchen that's our dream, right? Have a beautiful kitchen. But we're likely to make the investment, the $2,000 investment, which is more realistic, which you can get done and have some real benefits to the community, to our home. And in this case, if we have limited resources, then, you know, prioritizing things, knowing how much money we have to spend makes a lot more meaning. Whereas doing it without knowing how much we can afford, we're really sending a message that I don't think is realistic to what people would like to have.
But this isn't a budget, this is a plan.
No, I know it's a plan, I understand that.
That's
And people, so we're making this plan, we're ranking these things that I think all are very important. And we're sending that to the people, like the selectmen, and when we actually have money to spend, they use it as a reference point. And if that restricts their decision-making, then I think we're potentially causing problems. I think all these things are important.
Yeah, I think this is more aspirational, and you see what you can achieve, and perhaps you raise the funding for some aspects. That's the whole idea of Goal 8, I think, is be innovative with funding.
Yeah.
Look for grants, look for sources.
But like we said earlier, these are just guidelines. I mean, the selectmen don't have to strictly adhere to what's in here. And I don't think we want to assume, like you said, that we have unlimited resources. We should have in mind, you know, the current economic climate of the town.
These become political footballs, right? So for my project, if I want it, I say, hey, look at this. You know, protect all the, you know, subsurface waters is the most important thing the town wants to do. And I'm making a pitch to the selectmen to try to get my project done. That becomes leverage, right? And that's what this becomes, essentially. And that's what we're doing tonight, is we're deciding the direction we want our selectmen to go in for spending our resources.
Thank you.
what I'm hearing so far has to do with process, and it really doesn't have, in my view, I'm going to suggest, it doesn't have as much to do with MAPC. It has to do with the approach to governance in Littleton, i.e., how decisions get made and who determines the priorities. That's something that the Board of Selectmen has to address. And the related question, related to this, and I think that's what's driving your question, who's going to pay for this? Well, this is in relation to what else? I've listed over a dozen priorities or a dozen projects that are on the table now. Who is going to determine, when will the citizens decide, or be part of the conversation, to decide what is their priority? For example, I thought I heard you say, when this gets approved, it is going to the state. Is that what I heard?
It's actually the state, can you hear me? It's the state that actually approves it. We prepare the draft, finalize after what we're hearing. It goes to the state, they review it, they generally send it back for some modification. They always find something they want to have added or changed. As I said, many of the comments I've read recently are about priorities. You didn't prioritize your plan, they wrote to. Okay. And then it comes back and it's given to the town. Do you adopt it formally? I don't know, Keith. Does your town?
That was my question before.
Town meeting does not adopt.
No, town meeting.
That was my question. Will it go to the citizens before it goes to the state?
Another review to comment on the collective.
Well, this actually was planned to be, this was planned to be the last meeting, the last public meeting on the plan.
I'm just asking the question, and I'm wondering what the Board of Selectmen is hearing, because as was pointed out, this group in this room is not representative of 2,000 or 3,000 citizens that vote. It's a matter of process.
My question is, where are those 2,000 to 3,000? And I agree, like, same thing we did the survey a year and a half ago, we only got 200 and some odd people participating out of 8,000 families. You gotta start somewhere, and if we don't have a plan in place that's approved by the state, we can't apply for grants. That's part of the thing, is to get this plan in place.
I'm not sure you're hearing me. Just indulge me for 2 minutes. If I'm not mistaken, we have a master planning committee that's at work. When is that going to end, by the way?
About a year.
Okay.
It's going to be out soon.
Just a few of the items that are on the table now. Mill Pond, artificial turf, fire station, housing project for the Durkee land, the Cooper land, sewer, the Common. There are tons of items that citizens will end up paying for. Who determines the priorities?
Won't the citizens end up paying for it if they vote to have that done?
Yes.
At town meeting.
So they're not necessarily going to get those projects done if the town people don't vote for it.
And I said, this is not as much a question for this group, this is a question for the Board of Selectmen. Who determines the priorities? Will it be open space? Or is it a new fire station? That's a process question that won't be settled in this room.
If I can just follow up on that, I mean, I'm just a little puzzled by the priorities, you know, number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 3 is playing fields, but to Roland's point, last night, I think it's last night, Selectmen voted, you know, $250,000 towards the design of a new field that might cost us $3 million, and yet that's item ranked number 3. So I'm not going to touch toxic turf fields, natural field, I don't want to touch that, but it just, you know, to Roland's point, we appear to have decided, granted, it's going to town meeting, I get that, thank you, but to make this enormous decision that doesn't seem to be in keeping with their priorities here, you know, that we have here. And I almost wonder, I mean, go to your comment about the master plan. I mean, the master plan is supposed to govern all of this, and I'm not suggesting we defer all our planning until the master plan comes out, but it is supposed to be the master plan.
These plans are going to incorporate the production plan, and this plan as well will be absorbed into the greater master plan too. So they're not on separate tracks so much as we're kind of waiting for this product to fit into that. Keith, if I get that right?
Each of there are several components of the master plan, some of which happen to stand on their own, at least from a state perspective, because we need to have the housing production plan approved by a state agency in order to trigger certain requirements. The open space and recreation plan needs to be approved by another state agency in order for us to qualify for grants that frankly we will want to apply for before the master plan is complete. So we want to, but it's very much a balancing act, and I have to say when I look at even the priorities that are in this document, which were prepared by our open space committee, you talk about process. Well, the process is that the voters elect our elected officials, which include selectmen, school committee, park and rec, and library trustees, and it's a long list of elected officials. And that those elected officials appoint other committees, including with representation. The Open Space and Recreation Implementation Plan Committee is appointed by the Board of Selectmen with representation from a number of the groups that I mentioned, as well as citizens. Their task is to develop a plan. They bring that plan back to, I think it's at least the Conservation Commission is required to adopt an open space and recreation plan. Certainly the elected Park and Rec commissioners we would want, and then the Board of Selectmen. That's the system. That's our governmental system, where the voters elect people that are accountable to them. That we have processes that provide for public input, but at the end of the day, we do not have decision by referenda. That we go to town meetings for the decision, and we all know it's 200 to 300 people that show up on behalf of all 9,000. That is the system of how things get passed. That's how we appropriate budgets. That's how we pass bylaws, and the goals are set through a process that the Board of Selectmen, as the chief policymaking board, puts into place, where their goals include a master plan update, updating this open space plan, transportation. I mean, it's a long list of things that are priorities that are set by the Board of Selectmen, but reflect all of the things that are going on in the community. So at the end of the day, when it comes to adopting an open space plan, who adopts it? It's those representatives of the people that are charged with adopting a plan. So in the first cut, when the Open Space and Recreation Implementation Plan Committee approves a plan and brings it forward to the other boards that I mentioned on their way to the selectmen, that's their job. That's the task that we've given them, and we've asked them to have a mechanism by which there can be public input. But at the end of the day, just as the master plan is a document that's adopted by the planning board, that this particular document happens to be one that's adopted in the first instance by the committee that's hosting tonight's meeting. That's the process.
But sorry, you go.
I was just going to make a suggestion. I'm a citizen who tries hard to be somewhat involved. It's very difficult to go to every meeting. It's hard to even know when every meeting is happening. I think that maybe, and I was told last night by somebody who I know is on one of the boards, well, we can't always make it so easy for everybody, everybody just wants it to be easier for them to gain information. Well, my answer to that is, why shouldn't we be making it as easy for people to access this information if we really want citizens to be more involved in the planning process? It's not that hard, I have to admit. School committee has done a very good job over the last 2 years improving their process of not only posting an agenda, but the entire package, or as much as they can, prior to that meeting along with the agenda. So a citizen can look at the agenda and look at the packet and get at least some idea of what's happening. We don't get that with the Board of Selectmen yet. We don't get we're getting better agendas, but we never get the packet online, ever. We don't get a lot of this information online, and maybe somebody can't make the meeting, and then they don't have time to watch it, but sometimes they do. I watch a lot of the meetings on LCTV. I really am appreciative of those being available. But being able to access the information and then having the members of the committees of it, maybe I can look and see, these are the members of the committee. Oh, I know this person. I can talk to them. I can give my opinion and my input because I know them. But we don't do a great job with that yet. And I do think we might get more citizens to come to our town meeting if they felt like they were empowered when they got there. I can't tell you how many times you go and you sit there and it feels like everything's been decided already, because essentially it has. It's already been discussed many a time in meetings. There's been a whole lot of corroboration between FinCom and the Selectmen and the school committee and the other boards. And so most of it has been reasonably feted out and decided prior to the meeting. So you go there and there's not a whole lot you can affect. I mean, there's a little, but not a whole lot. So being more involved during the course of the year than just at town meeting is important. And I think if citizens had more opportunity to do that, maybe we draw them in by making it easier for them to get access to this information, that we would get more input, hopefully positive input, because that's really what we want, and support for the direction that our town is trying to head in, and to fund these things that we decide are priority, or that is decided in these small groups, and then actually draw people out to be a part of the town meeting too. That's just a suggestion. Well, I do think it would really help.
Worthwhile.
I think there are a lot of people my age, and even some of the younger folk moving in, that do want to be a part of this. They tend to look at social media for a lot of their information, and sometimes that's not always complete, it's not always accurate. It would be nice to have a place where people can go and find that. I don't know how many times people said, I couldn't find that plan that was presented at the meeting online anywhere. I looked everywhere. People said, look at this page, it's not there. So that's not good communicating.
These folks, thank you for that. These folks have a presentation. What I'm hearing is, it's up to the town manager and the Board of Selectmen to ask themselves, what are they hearing in this room, and figure out how to respond constructively to that. Would you continue, please?
Well, I'd like to introduce Mark Rassicott, the Director of Land Use at MAPC, and he gave me the signal, so his title was good to me.
Actually, what I want to do is make sure you all get home before tomorrow. So, really good discussion tonight.
I like your style.
This has been a really good discussion. I've been taking a lot of notes over there. I know Andrew's been taking notes, so all of this is going to impact the writing, the final writing of this draft report that will be available. As Keith said, it will go through the process here in town so that you can have the final say on it. So, one of the things I was going to do has already been taken care of by Cynthia, where she went through each of the goals and talked about what the action items were underneath there. What we're trying to do, first of all, is to make sure that the consensus in this room is that the number one goal under each, the number one action item under each of those goals feels okay to everybody in this room. And again, I know there's been discussion about, is this financially constrained, is this not financially constrained? I'm a realist. I think it has to be financially constrained. If you think that, I've got $10 to spend, what are my priorities here? What's the most important thing to me under each of these under each of these goals, what's the most important action item, then that's how you should be thinking of it. Because it is financially constrained. The town can't spend, an unlimited amount of money on open space and recreation, because as has been pointed out, you have other things you've got to do too. So, I would like, just really quickly, to verify that the goals under each of these items are okay. Because then what we want to do, because those are the goals that are written up here. If you want to replace one of those action items, if you think, well, on number 3, for instance, it should be a different one, or on number 4, it should be a different one, we'll do a quick polling of the room. If more than 50% think it should be changed, we can do a quick change on it. And then we want you to prioritize these items. And again, this is not the final say. There's been several forums, there's been the survey, but this, again, we want to reach out to you tonight and just see what this group has to say about this. And when this is all finally written up, we'll take all of those public input opportunities into account, and we'll have these as priorities. Now, just because it's a priority also doesn't mean that the items underneath it don't get addressed. I'll use him, sure. My brother, the lawyer, okay? If there's any lawyers in the room, apologies. He's a great guy, but he tried to tap maple syrup out of an oak tree one time, okay? Doesn't work. I told him that. But he has his open space priorities. He knows what he thinks is important, because I talked to him about that. And in his case, it's water, okay? And he is very, very much in favor of protecting water. So everybody's priorities are going to be a little bit different. If the top priority is preservation of water, for most folks, there can still be a lot of work done on all of the other priorities in this plan. So don't feel like just because something's not the top priority, it's going to get lost. Okay, so goal number 1, protect and enhance water quality in Littleton. You all have the document, and as Cynthia said, the first one was protect all surface and subsurface waters. You see that there's a lot of others listed under there, all related to water quality, but the top goal from the committee and from the surveys seems to be the protection of the water quality, the surface water. So is there general consensus on that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Quickly moving on to 2. So, preserve Littleton's important land resources through acquisition, conservation restrictions, agricultural preservation restrictions. Those 2, by the way, are cases where the landowner still owns the land, but they've given up the development rights on it, so it would stay as a forest or stay as a farm. So, in this case, the number one action item was purchase open space of interest and farmland as it comes available and stay aware of upcoming opportunities.
Yes.
Generally consensus? Yes, sir.
Yes.
I'm not sure what this is going to do. How does this benefit the town?
Well, okay, I will say that, among other things, the Ag Commission, Conservation Commission, and others should have an active list of all of the lands that are under the Chapter 61 program, which is the Agricultural Assessment Program. Knowing that list and knowing who may be dropping out of it or who may be selling land while it's subject to those assessment programs can allow the town to plan ahead to decide whether or not they want to exercise their right of first refusal on the land. It buys you time to do some thinking. If you have if you're staying aware of the upcoming opportunities. Yes, sir.
I would actually have said that the second priority is more important, working with the landowners to put land under conservation restriction.
Okay.
And ag restriction, because you get a lot more bang for your buck. If I can buy the development rights to a property for cheaper than I can buy the property, I don't have to maintain the property, but I'm preventing it from being developed anyway. So I think you're getting a lot more bang for your buck, and I would say that, I mean, I think they're close 1A and 1B, but I would have flipped the order.
They actually go together, is what the argument's going to be.
Yes, sir, in the back, and then to you, ma'am.
They're not mutually exclusive.
I agree, but if we're voting on one as being number one.
But number two, most of the value of a piece of property is the development rights. You take so you might save 10% by buying the development rights, yet you don't have the opportunities for access you do if you own it outright. So you might save a little, I don't see you saving a huge amount. But I think really the two are kind of complementary, because you may find, for example, the APRs, I think it was Matheson's farm, he was able to purchase an APR, get an APR from the state, so that stays farmland forever, he gets the farm. I think some of that was done with Polly too, wasn't it?
Okay, ma'am?
It's a CR.
I guess my comment has to do with possibly combining the two. I just, based on watching some of the things that have gone on in town with Cooperland and some of the other things, it seems like the stakeholders in the land could be, I don't know how the mechanism, but it seems like the stakeholders ought to be in our priority, or like top priority, to keep our stakeholders involved in it too, because they're the ones who are, it's their land, it's their value, it's their.
They're the active managers of the open space.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like,
Okay.
the way this is written, it kind of pulls the rug out of.
So how about, can I make a proposed amendment?
I'd like to add the stakeholder to it.
If we add to this, including purchase of development rights as an option?
Can we just change it to
Would that work for folks? Pardon?
Just change it instead of purchase to say permanently protect open space and farmland.
How about purchase or permanently protect?
Combine 1 and 2 together.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
So the intent will be to combine 1 and 2.
Yep.
And I will,
May I just let everybody in this room know that the Agricultural Commission is meeting tomorrow night to discuss everything that mentions agriculture here. So they are planning on submitting a document that states their concerns with this and all of that too. So it might be helpful
That's
to
excellent.
work off of what the agricultural community has to say about some of these items.
Sure. Where will that document go to?
We'll submit it to Keith and it can filter out from there.
okay, that's fantastic.
Because I know that the agricultural community has some issues with some of these items.
Okay. All right. Knowing that, and knowing that there will be further amendments, do folks in the room in general feel comfortable with this as being the number one action statement under this goal?
Would you read the amendment?
Okay, it basically says permanently protect or purchase open space and farmland, and it's not mapped.
Okay.
That's good.
Yep.
Okay, so moving on to number 3, which is provide improved recreational opportunities for Littleton residents of all ages and abilities. Again, there's a wide variety of action statements. The action statement that came out of the survey and the previous discussions as the top priority was acquire and or construct more playing fields. Yes, sir, and then you.
Yeah, I've got a sort of a clarification, because this says, acquire or construct essentially new playing fields. But again, last night, the selectmen put us on a path to potentially spend, $3.5 to $4 million fixing an existing field. And I promise you that if we spend $4 million fixing Alumni Field, we ain't going to be spending other millions to buy other fields. So again, I'm just struck by the fact that the number one action on the goal has essentially been mooted by the actions of one of our boards. And to Keith's point about...
I totally disagree with that.
And maybe you could let me finish talking before you interrupt me, because that's part of the respect thing, isn't it? Isn't it? This is what we talk about, respect.
It was not,
Okay.
posting really means social media.
Okay. Sort of lost my train of thought, but there's...
If the wording was changed to require...
Require, improve. This is the thing. This is the thing that we have in town, is that the boards won't listen to us. We can't even finish a sentence without getting interrupted, which is why we don't show up, oftentimes. The proposal that's going to the next town meeting is to fix one field, even though at our last town meeting, Keith, the proposal to do a similar thing got shot down. This says new fields. It doesn't say fix an existing field, and I would not be in favor of changing the wording here to make it retroactively agree with what the selectmen voted on Monday. I'd say that it should be new fields, and I'm just, wasn't able to make last night's meeting, but I'll sure check be at the next town meeting to try to stop that action. And now I'm finished, and you can go ahead.
Okay. The selectman first and then over here.
I'd just like to correct that I don't think any actions taken last night mute this wording at all. I think that's what we're here to do, is to agree on the wording. We heard at the beginning of the call that the team in place summarized the feedback that they got. It's a wording choice, so let's agree to amend it or not. But I would argue I don't understand why we wouldn't want to improve existing fields and just solely acquire new ones. So I would recommend adding the word improve to the first priority.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for being patient.
I would actually, along the same lines, but actually say that we need a total comprehensive plan. And this was brought up last night, that we have various fields in various conditions, and I don't think any one person or one committee has a handle on all of them, all the uses that are needed, how they can be improved, and balancing, improving what we have, managing what we have, maintaining what we have, versus acquiring new ones, which also need maintenance. And so I would actually say that the number one priority is to figure that out and make a plan holistically covering all the playing fields. And from that, decide, is it more fields, is it improving what we have?
Thank you. Yes, sir, in the back.
So I would agree that there is a plan that's needed to cover all of the fields. I would say that as someone who utilizes the fields across many different sports, I can say we have a lack of available fields. So I don't think you're mutually exclusive to say that you can't prioritize obtaining new fields until you have a master plan. I think we can hopefully agree that in total, there's not enough field space for the use that we have now in the growing town. I would also say that it's not also mutually exclusive to repairing existing fields. I think that's part of the overall plan that we need to put in place. But I do think that there is a priority of identifying more fields, because as the town continues to grow and more things are needed, what we have available, whether they're fixed, funded to maintain them or not, is still not sufficient for what we need in this town.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
So I agree with the gentleman up there who just made those comments, and I'd also support the amendment to improve. I mean, I think at the end of the day, a lot of people are just interested in getting, frankly, in many cases, safe fields for fields today that aren't safe on a number of occasions. And if you haven't had an opportunity to go look at them, I suggest you do. I think if we got to that point, that could come out of some sort of analysis. And I do believe, by the way, that a lot of analysis has been done that just demonstrates just gross overusage. The grass just doesn't get a chance to grow. And we're not getting any smaller anytime soon. So I would propose that we update this to be and/or improve.
Yes, ma'am.
I do think that you do have to have an overarching view of all of the playing fields, what the expected use is that's needed to suffice for all the sports, both park and rec and school sports, and know what the amount of hours you need during those high seasons so that you can take an inventory and say, these are the fields that are usable for these sports now. They're saying that there is that, and then being able to also figure out maintenance, because regardless of how many fields you add, if we don't use a proper rotation schedule or, that, and so that we can maintain them, because that hasn't been happening. You're right, there's a lot of overuse, we're aware of it, but is there really a plan in place to figure out how to reduce that and be able to keep the fields we have in proper, good condition to be used? Whether or not it's, determining that certain fields are practice fields only for a certain period of time and game fields and whatever, but having a plan and knowing what that is, sort of a master plan of the fields, I think is very important. That way you can know how many you need to add.
Okay, thank you. In the back and then over here. Yes, sir.
I would concur. It seems like that, at least if that's not the priority, that should be documented here somewhat.
Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
And I am the recreation director for the town of Littleton, so I can tell you that we do meet we'll take, with the school uses specifically as their plan for the season. So this past spring, we sat down, we had everything written out on a schedule. We also met with soccer, with lacrosse, with baseball to come up with a usage need. And I can tell you that the fields that we do have, there's a lot of overlap. So Whitcomb Field is a perfect example of that, where we have some situations where, if there's softball playing, then another sport can't use it because they would use that outfield to do either their practice or their games. So, the fact that we're using one specific field that's supposed to be for, say, softball, and divvying that up into having, a soccer field as well that's be played in their outfield. Those are the type of issues where, when we talk about rotation, and that's a really important piece when we're talking about grass and being able to support and have, healthy fields, we have no option of doing any rotation at all at this point. And that's why we need to look into finding other options for fields. For example, at the middle school, when you go into the parking lot, the side little grass area over there, that's a practice field. It has to be, because that's the only space that we have for, some of the lacrosse kids to use. So those are the type of things where we're using every inch of space that we possibly can, and because we're doing that, we are overusing. So I would love to be able to see moving forward that we do have a plan and that we have more space to be able to use, so that that rotation can help and have healthy fields.
Mark, I'm wondering if we should make that, doing a plan, almost a feasibility plan or a study is the number one action item under that goal. Is that pretty much the consensus of the room to substitute?
No, just to be candid, because I think that you've seen a lot of numbers and stuff that have already been crunched. I don't know if they've just not been well circulated and stuff, but I think that's been completed to a large extent.
I'm going to make a suggestion also, and now I'll go back to this, sir. Might we be able to say, acquire, construct, or reconstruct adequate number of playing fields and undertake a feasibility study?
Fine, revisit the demand analysis.
Something along those lines it's kind of a merger of the two thoughts.
Sure.
Would that work for folks?
Well, I don't think it's that people don't think they need more fields or fields improved. It's just, what's the priority? What do you do first? What one is most cost effective? That's what I'm hearing from a plan. Not just study it, but like say, okay, if we've got 2.5 million, what do we do with it? Or if we've got 500,000, what do we do with it? Is it better to fix that field over there, or is it more cost effective to go fix that one over there? Or maybe buy that land because it's becoming a bit, that's what I'm hearing. Is that what?
Okay,
And so not just let's study, should we get, there's no question.
Okay.
You knew it.
So I'm going to take one more question, and then I'm going to ask somebody to give me the bumper sticker version of that to put up here. Yes, sir.
The first priority has to be, in a cost-effective manner, fix what you've got. Why go out and build yet another monument to somebody when you got fields that are deteriorated, and it's gotta be less expensive to go in, reseed, resod, than go and develop something from scratch. And I think one of the things-
So who's going to help me with the bumper sticker? I need a volunteer. I need a volunteer for the bumper sticker up here.
Hey, develop a plan to acquire, construct, enhance, maintain playing fields.
Okay. I think that's good, but I'm thinking that developing the plan doesn't quite meet what I heard. I think people want to move ahead with some construction immediately, some fixing things immediately, and do a plan maybe consecutively at the same time.
We already know we don't have,
Sorry.
how do you decide what to do if you don't have a plan?
Okay, so you want to develop a plan. Okay, so give me the bumper sticker again.
And I wish I could say a way to impart some haste, but develop a short-term plan to acquire and/or construct and/or repair sufficient playing fields in the short term. I mean, I hear you, soon.
To meet the needs.
To meet the needs, yes.
It needs to be a long-term plan, but implemented as soon as possible.
Of course, my pen runs out of ink.
Short-sighted. I know what you mean.
Right.
So that's not a replacement, right?
I don't know, I understand the haste, but I think if she's correct, and she happens to be the person who must know the most detail, if we know that we're already using fields which are meant for softball as practice fields, we know we don't have enough field space, but we need to know how much more field space we need and for what purpose. Is it that we just need more practice fields, which may be easier to acquire and not have to put a lot of money into because they don't have to be pristine as playing fields, and then take the bulk of the money to upgrade what we have for playing fields so that they are safe and appropriate for the teams that need that improvement? I mean, I think we need a plan that really does look at everything so that if we reconstruct or build new and we end up, not appropriately still having the space for practice and playtime, it's not going to make a darn bit of difference.
Okay, so the reworded goal is to develop a short-term plan to acquire, construct, reconstruct more playing fields as a general concept. No, I'm seeing...
The goal is not just to create a plan. The goal is to create a plan and do the work. Acquire, construct, and build more, have more playing fields.
Why don't we just put repair and reconstruct before the, repair what we have, and then create a plan to figure out how to get
All the current fields we have right now, in 5 years, they'd be deteriorating to the same state they're in again. Because we're not letting any field rest.
Exactly.
There's no circulation.
Exactly.
But kids are still playing on them season by season, and they're throwing rocks in each other's faces, kicking up dust. So I feel like in the short term, like, do you spray water on them, or do you do some reseeding, or, are there some things we can do?
Reseed in spring, when baseball, soccer, lacrosse is playing, or early fall, when football, soccer, field hockey's playing. So the grass doesn't have time to grow, because nobody can stay off it long enough for it to grass.
Wouldn't it be ideal if you're seeding the football field in the spring because they're not playing on it? Right, but that's my point. Where's the plan for it? We need this many fields to support this many teams, and so we need to acquire this much property in order to make that work, and so that we can properly maintain our field space, so it doesn't continuously get overused.
Okay. One question, and I've got another attempt up here, yes.
Just my attempt at it.
Great.
Does it make sense to say, develop and implement a plan for management of the current and any future fields?
I like the idea of develop and deploy, right? Go out and execute something.
Yeah.
Okay?
But no, what,
That sounds like we can't execute something. so
That's
we
why I
don't have
said
space to
develop first,
execute
right?
something.
That's fine. You got 90, I'd move on. You got 90% there.
Development.
What's written up here right now,
Implement means to do it.
Develop short-term plan and acquire, construct, reconstruct adequate number of playing fields, which is kind of that.
I like it. I like the develop and implement. Implement means to do
Develop and
it.
implement, okay.
It means to do it. It means you're doing it.
Okay. It's still, we'll wordsmith it afterwards. We've got the idea. All right. Number 4, which was balanced development with preservation of open space and to help retain Littleton's rural character. Got a series of items here, and the number 1 was encourage priority preservation in scenic open space and agricultural lands through the use of the planning board's open space development bylaw. Yes?
Question. I see my property has a number 4 on top of it. Likewise with mostly all the 61A properties up and down 119. Why is it just 119 and not all the other 61A properties?
It's a very good question. The idea was to have some examples, and if we don't have enough adequate examples on there, we could certainly add them. Or if you want, we could remove some. These were simply as illustrative.
And would that open space cluster bylaw be optional or would it be mandatory?
It's optional.
It's optional right now.
And
I thought the planning board did have the power to make it mandatory.
is questionable in interpretation.
it's questionable, so,
It's being, that's actually subject of a court case in another town, whether they
Yes.
can
Yeah.
make you do it or
It
not.
is.
So I think for now, it certainly is optional.
well, it's questionable, it's questionable if it would be mandatory or optional.
Correct.
But no case is it reducing the valuation of the land. I think that's the important part.
I would like to see the recommendations come in. All the large property owners are, a majority of them anyways, are meeting with the Agricultural Commission tomorrow night, and I would like to see what the property owners have to say about that,
About that goal,
about that goal.
about the action item. rather.
And you wrote that, so you.
Well, we have 2 ways of dealing with this. One is we can take a consensus of the room now. 2 is we can leave this one blank. And you all can look and see what goes and gets posted on the web, which we can take into account the information from the Ag Commission. And then you can send emails in. With that, would that be advisable?
I think the people that would have the best knowledge and background and input on this specific item would be those that own those properties.
Oh, yeah, I mean, we definitely want to hear from the agricultural property owners on this issue.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so, yes, sir.
This is really more of a legislative issue, and perhaps it should be expanded to say, look at Littleton's zoning rules and how it can encourage preservation and balance, balanced with development. It goes beyond just an open space bylaw. And I know there have been some failed attempts at this in the past in regards to opening flexibility, but that's really the key is you got to balance property rights of the landowners, and if you do it right, everybody wins.
Yes, sir.
I'm interested if someone from the committee could explain the difference between goal number 2 and goal number 4, the one we're discussing. Goal number 2 says preserve Littleton's important land resources through land acquisition, et cetera, including agriculture. And number 4 speaks of open space, rural character, and references both those ideas in the number 1 action item along with agricultural lands. So what's the difference between number 2 and number 4 in your mind?
Number 4 is more like.
Number 4 is a regulatory outcome, and number 2 is where you might actually acquire the property by purchasing it.
For those who are listening at home and who may not have picked that up because the microphones are all up here, the number 2 is really more about acquisition and purchase. Number 4 is more about regulatory and balancing of development with preservation. Okay. But it sounds like we're going to pass on this one. Is that, or who would like to take a pass on this, or who would like to vote on this tonight? So who would like to vote on this tonight? And then we would, of course, take the input from the Ag Commission at a later time. Voting tonight, raise hands. Seeing anybody?
What are we voting on?
Voting tonight would be deciding whether or not you wanted to place a priority goal, priority action statement under goal number 4.
What if we didn't?
If you didn't, you'd have the opportunity to do that through email later.
Right.
Email?
Yes.
After getting input.
Well, should we at least briefly discuss, because there's a lot of possibilities for actions, if people have, something that they feel more strongly about, because I don't know if education to me is the most important, maybe, considering, developing the incentive, the agricultural incentive, if we're talking about
It's a highlighted yellow.
legislator.
It's a yellow area.
Gray, well, yeah.
Oh,
And this
all
is
right.
their
Oh,
number
there we
one
go. I
under
see.
number 4.
Okay, I was confused because of the number.
Right. In all of the others, it was the first one, and this one, it didn't happen to be. It was the
Okay.
highlighted area.
That's why I was not driving with the other one. Okay.
So it's tabled?
So who would like to table it? Please raise your hand. Okay, who would like to, hold on, up one more time, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All right, who would like to vote on it tonight? Sounds like that one's tabled.
Moving right
Okay,
along.
moving right along.
You're good, Mark.
Okay, rule number 5, I'm not a town meeting moderator. That's what you got here tonight. Okay, rule number 5, enhance bicycle and pedestrian access and safety throughout town. The one that is highlighted was establish more bicycle and pedestrian routes on new and existing town, private, state-owned land, and Cynthia interprets that to be also the roads. The difference between this and some of the others that are further down is that the others further down really just have just roads. This is looking at some of the bigger parcels of land too, where you might be able to make connections through. So that's why I think this one was number 1. Consensus on that? Okay, moving ahead.
I just have one question on this. And
Yes.
We've been working on trying to establish some commuter trails, ultimately bike trails, and the same for shopping trails, so that people can do their shopping or their commuting without getting in their car. Just, I don't know whether that could be more specific here.
I think that it would be included in that.
Generally, it is. Generally, when you say on private and state-owned land and stuff like that. But
We can certainly make a note that this should include commuter and shopping, not just recreation.
yeah, that's all I was getting at. Because we are actually
Thank you.
very much working towards this.
Right. Okay, number 6, promote the use of Littleton's open space by residents through developing better access to protected properties and encouraging community participation in open space maintenance. The number 1 action statement under there was to improve, expand parking areas. And with the thought that where possible, try to do this in year-round.
Yeah, maybe put in year-round. We've expanded year-round.
Where possible, because not always going to be possible, but where it's possible and appropriate. Consensus on that, or were there other thoughts? Yes?
I would just say, walking around with Cynthia at some of the parks too, there was also limited accessibility in some of the parks that we have. So Faye, we're sharing with the fire department, and I think there was only about 2 handicap spaces there. So I would also ask to include the parks.
Space and recreation properties.
And recreation properties, okay. We'll make a note of that. All right. Almost there, folks. Those magic dots are waiting for you to use them. Okay, 7, link Littleton's open space and trails throughout town and on a regional level, particularly near shared natural resources. And this was the action statement of working with contiguous towns to identify parcels to connect with. General consensus on that? Okay?
Yes.
All right. Sounds like the Open Space and Recreation Committee did a good job putting these together. Not a lot of discussion. So number 8, where find funding resources outside taxes for protecting open space or building recreation facilities. The goal was also the action item. There was also the question of whether or not this should be wrapped into an overall introduction. We can do that, but I do think it should still stay as a goal and action item. So does everybody agree that this broad goal should also be the action? You shouldn't try and divide it up, because there's so many opportunities there. You don't want to miss any of them.
Maybe the word "or" should be "and," because you're talking about both.
All right, well, we'll discuss that with the committee. I can't make a decision right now. Okay, goal number 9, identify and preserve significant Native American historical and culturally significant sites. The number 1 action was to create a town historic or neighborhood conservation district.
Yes, really how, and there's great interest in, you mentioned across the street, I live across the street. I think people there were interested. We're got defeated, the real estate people say, it's going to diminish value downtown, and I think it's how the district is created, whether it encourages preservation or mandates it.
Okay. Yes, sir, in the back.
Along with that, there's really other regulatory avenues. This town has a demolition delay bylaw that, pardon my French, is a joke.
6 months.
6 months, it's resulted in 1 save, and developers wait it out. They just say, people don't even show up for hearings, they just wait it out. So we should look not just at a historic district, but at other regulatory and other tools that can encourage preservation as opposed to demolition.
Do folks accept that as a friendly amendment? Okay.
That is the cheap way to do it, though. That is really the best way. I've worked with a number of towns wrangling with the same issue, and it really does, if you really want to do it, you need a district, either preservation or neighborhood conservation.
But does that mean anything outside of the district is fair?
No, you still do the demolition delay. You still would do that. But you would choose an area that you felt most, because the property owners have to agree. So you find an area where people really want to do it, and you see how it works. You can start small, and then you can expand it. You can go to a different one. Some communities actually make a district of 1 property. There's one community that does that a lot. It seems a little odd, but it's legal, and that's what they do. But believe me, I've worked with, last year, I worked with the community trying to save great estates and trying to do it, and they didn't want a historic district, so,
Is it typically one historic district, though, that's created in a town?
No, you can have many,
Okay.
because you want a contiguous group of properties. When you write your reports and do your research, you want to have characteristics that most of the properties share.
Right.
So you tailor it to that area. And that's why I say, kind of start small, start with an area that really fits the bill, and then you can look in other parts of town and go on from there.
Okay, so we've come to the time of night where your magic voting dots will be used. Now, I would like to return very briefly to the question of goal number 4. I know that we didn't want to put a priority action under goal number 4, because we want to wait for the Ag Commission. However, what I'm going to be asking you to do at this point in time is place your number 1 on what you consider to be your top priority up here, number 2 on your second priority, etc., down to your 9th priority. I don't want to lose this goal from there. would it be okay to just have, replace the action with the goal of balanced development with the preservation of open space to help retain Littleton's character, and then have to be determined action under it? Because I don't want that to be lost as an option for you to vote on.
I think that'd be more appropriate.
Would that be okay? All right, so, yes, sir.
Yeah, just quickly, is it possible to at least rank these by cost before I prioritize them? Get a sense of what the most...
No. Unfortunately, the cost is going to be all over the place. Some things will, a small piece of conservation land may not cost a lot. A single recreation field may not be that big. If you're going to do 10 recreation fields, that might be something big. So it's going to be kind of, this is a guidebook. It's not a hard and fast level of priority. The selectmen are not bound. They don't have to go with number one. And you also have to note that this is, as several folks have said, this is a sampling of the town. We've also got the sampling of the town through the survey. We've got the sampling of the town through the first form. So this is all to give guidance, but it's not definitive. So I think that what it would be important is if there's a clear number 1, 2, and 3, and a clear 7, 8, and 9, then that might help to provide some guidance and some priority for the Open Space and Recreation Committee, as well as the selectmen in their actions. Yes, sir.
I'm still not sure what to do with number 8, which seems like a square peg with all the other round ones.
Make it number 1 if you want.
Yes, you can make it number 1. If you think that and I understand where you're coming from, it is a slightly different animal, because we're voting on the goal, although we've just changed number 4 to also be the goal.
So what do you want us to mark?
Okay. No, I don't want you to mark there. What I want you to do, as soon as I rewrite number 4 up here to be the goal, I want you to take your list, your dots. You come on up, take your number 1, and say, oh, I think my number 1 is utilize the open space cluster bylaw. Put that on there. We will total these later, and the ones with the lowest number will be the highest priority, and the ones with the highest number will be the sort of the bottom priority. So you'll put your dots on these boards up here. You can, of course, think about it before you come up. And give me a second to rewrite number 4 to be the goal. And this will be the last exercise of the evening. Cynthia, do we have a wrap-up afterwards, or can folks head home to watch?
Does the final comments were Keith?
Would you like to have final comments before we... Yes. Okay, a question first. Yes.
When does this have to be into the state to keep us on track to get our grants and stuff? When's the final draft have to be in?
I would do it as soon as possible, but over the next month and a half, 2 months would probably be reasonable, I think. What's the...
People walking out.
You
got people walking out.
Yeah.
You've lost 5 people in the last 10 minutes. Let's vote.
So let's vote. All right. There we go.
There's a short tour. So I actually have a portion of my property. So when we go to talk about cluster zoning,
Unless they start doing the nutcracker on grass,
this direction. I don't know. Sorry,
lots of resources, let's just say, academic. That they don't count, they say you have to count that value, and then that's like your.
There is some, I'm actually exploring that.
What's your last name?
Oh, okay.
It's hard to put. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, she might pass.
I pay attention to your comments. No, they're all valuable points.
Standing up straight.
When you're putting your nines up, put them up the right way so they don't look like sixes. We should be. All right, thank you, well done, I'm going home.
Have a good night, thanks for coming.
No problem. Thanks for patience. No problem, it's good stuff.
It's hard for someone to look and do this cell phone, but can't.
My cell phone? What is going on?
I called.
Oh, yes. We can get some of the stuff.
Sorry for the confusion on this.
But like,
I mean, they met under really quick circumstances.
But anyhow.
Well, the committee certainly did a lot of work.
Like a date when you want to start?
Yes, I think so, yeah, just been,
Because I just
had a rash.
Jim,
Right.
and, we'll talk about like the actual time frame.
It is, yeah. I'm going on a month with this.
The rainy weather, and they had the fertilizer that they put down today, so the fields were snowed completely. So Jim and I will meet Monday morning. We already have a plan to do that, to discuss and see where they're at as far as like getting maintenance down. Because like baseball takes a little bit longer to get, those actual pieces done. So it does. So they've been working on trying, because they have to like hire specific machinery to do like edging.
I'm gonna be informed of
so we want to make sure that they're checked off and they're ready to go. So we can't have like baseball in there until we have like that down.
Very observant. We should have made sure our sixes and nines were the right way.
I would imagine it's kind of like confusing spreadsheets and like. Not necessarily. And one of the things that I mentioned was recently last night was that we have a lot of changes in the budget season because of that. So if I can probably have a lot of state licenses right now, if I can get some time to be able to sort of like do where I'd like to go and
But it's not the same thing. It's on the way to the program. I'm glad someone can. Good.
Really well, no. My anything's true that on it, I'm running.
Materials, somebody's selling.
Well, we all want to.
I know right now, I know that there might be 3 for 2 positions, so I'm not sure how that's going to go. If, you know, it's,
It's hard, but I could actually write cards.
How was your trip?
Email down.
what I can do is I can give you my call, you can second.
Yeah, sure, I can do something here.
Okay. No, I'll send you my email.
Space and Recreation update. We will be making copies available of tonight's results at our town website. We will also be posting in due course the text of the draft plan, and would invite your comment. If you do have any comments, send it to this address, openspace@littletonma.org. Thanks very much for all the work that the Open Space and Recreation Plan Implementation Committee has done, and for the community input into the process. Our thanks to MAPC, Cynthia Wall and Mark Rassicott for coming back again tonight and working on this project, and to all of you for participating through LCTV. Thanks very much.